Welcome to today's webinar, brought to you by Satori, Monte Carlo, and Quest. I'm Stephen Fagg, Director at Database Trends and Applications and Unisphere Research. I will be your host for today's broadcast. Our presentation today is titled, How to Democratize Your Data with DataOps. Before we begin, I want to explain how you can be a part of this broadcast. There will be a question and answer session. If you have a question during the presentation, just type it into the question box provided and click on the submit button. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible, but if your question has not been selected during the show, you will receive an email response. Plus, all viewers today will be entered for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card just for participating. Now, to introduce our speakers for today, we have Ben Herzberg, Chief Scientist and VP of Marketing at Satori, Jesse Miller, Product Manager at Monte Carlo, and Danny Sandwell, Senior Solutions Manager at Quest. Now I'm going to pass the event over to Ben to get us started. Welcome to the broadcast, Ben.
Thank you. Just 1 second. Had a technical issue. Okay, but I'm back. So just being conscious of time, I started the timer, so I wanted to leave as much time for questions as possible. I see something in the conversions there. My email is really small, but a little bit about myself. I am the co-author of Snowflake Security, published on APRESS last year. I'm a DataSecOps guy. Most of my experience is either from the data space or from the security space. I'm chief scientist for Satori, joined as part of the founding team, and recently also VP marketing. Before that, I was head of research at Imperva and CTO for Cynet. And what we see, guess it's not very surprising, is that everybody wants data democratization. Companies worldwide are doing it. A lot of trend of cloud migration, multi-cloud, hybrid, but everybody wants to be able to get more value out of data by more people in the organization, so people can look for data and find it easily across the different data stores the companies have, especially analytics data, and make use of it. So this should be no surprise. We did a survey last year and asked several hundreds of data leaders about different things. It's the DataSecOps survey, and 75% of them responded that they're working on project to increase access to data to more users, which is great. But it's also quite hard. I'm just touching on the subject because it's just a quick intro, but it's hard because when you want to give people more of that data, there are security requirements that has to be met, and the more people who has access to data, if it's done in an uncontrolled way, the larger your risk is, obviously. There are compliance issues as well. Even from the operational aspect of compliance, knowing who has access to what is harder to do when 40% of your company is accessing your analytics data than when it's one team. So compliance requirements, as well as privacy requirements, keeps getting more and more advanced or demanding. So those are other aspects of why it's hard. And of course, operational, allowing more people to access data, more teams. Not all of them are very technical, has operational aspects as well. How do you not create a situation when someone accidentally makes a scan in Athena in a loop, and you end up with a $50K AWS bill for a script that was running. It's also hard because there is some confusion or some ambiguity about who is actually responsible for for securing access to the sensitive data. Is it the data teams? Is it the security teams? So that's also a problem. So Winston Churchill once said that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. I say that data democracy is the worst form of data governance except for all the others. Or what I'm saying is that as an ex-security person, data democratization sounds like a nightmare, but it just brings so much value to organizations. So just wrapping it up, these are some of the complexities around getting access to people at scale, democratizing data, its access, compliance, security, all sorts of different requirements. And basically that's what we do. I just wanted to finish with that, and not a full description of what Satori does, but we handle access, compliance, and security to enable self-service data access for organization in a just-in-time way, on a need-to-know basis, without all the complications across all of the data. Looking forward to the discussion, and of course, if anyone wants to hear more about Satori, let me know. And below 5 minutes.
All right. Thank you very much, Ben. That was a great primer, and I loved the Churchill quote. So at this point in time, we're going to pass the mic over to Jesse Miller, product manager at Monte Carlo, so we can get a little bit more acquainted with what they're doing and seeing.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So I'm going to cover a little bit about what Monte Carlo does and really how to democratize your data using data observability, and kind of where that comes into the same picture in the Monte Carlo space. So a little bit about me. I'm Jesse Miller. I'm a product manager at Monte Carlo. I've been in the data space for over 10 years, working both in data observability, streaming data, data mesh, all that. So looking forward to this conversation today. So real quickly, what I'm going to talk about is understanding data observability. What is it? What makes it different than other observability out there? And then also, how does this help with reliable data democratization? So first up, to talk about data observability, let's really define what data observability is. You've probably seen the term observability as like this hot buzz. Just checking audio. I think we're good. Okay. So we've probably seen this term data observability. And when we're talking about data observability, we're really talking about an organization's ability to really fully understand the health of the data flowing through their systems. You know, at its root, data observability really helps eliminate that data downtime by applying a lot of the same principles that you have in DevOps observability today. Things like using automated monitoring, alerting, and triaging, really to identify and evaluate data quality and discoverability issues. So all this together really leads to more reliable data, healthier pipelines, and more productive teams that hopefully you don't get that angry message from your CEO on Monday morning why their beautiful dashboard is not accurate or showing wonky numbers. So data observability really comes in these 5 pillars, and this is really how we define it. Freshness, volume, schema, quality, and lineage. And altogether, these pillars really help answer the common questions of, is my data up to date? Is the data complete? Are the fields within their expected ranges? Is the null rate higher than it should be, or has a schema changed? Things like that. Now, when we, as an organization, being able to take those questions and answer those questions that I just mentioned, it really is one of the keys to unlocking data democratization. So at Monte Carlo, we've really helped a lot of organizations build this trust in your data. And at the center of it, is really what we do. We've built the world's first data observability platform, which, one, automatically detects data incidents for you. Two, it equips your team with fully automated lineage, context, and workflow tools that you really need to do the triaging or find root causes and quickly resolve incidents. And three, it gives you on-demand insights that really helps your team prevent these data incidents altogether. So as you make field or table or schema changes or even migrations of your data, it really helps you prevent those issues. And really, our platform does this all by running machine learning models across your entire data stack, across those 7 pillars that I just mentioned, to help you kind of get that level of trust and confidence. So to bring this all together, Monte Carlo has helped many organizations along this journey of adopting data observability, and we've observed 4 key areas of value that each one of them have really realized. One, these organizations see enhanced data productivity and accessibility across the board. Having this data observability in place just makes data more accessible to a broader range of users. 2, improved data quality. Perhaps by no surprise, data observability really helps organizations identify and resolve data quality issues in this real time. 3, greater transparency. Data observability really promotes greater transparency and accountability within these organizations of their data, really providing that clear view. And then 4, greater data adoption across teams. Greater observability, greater transparency, greater adoption, just breaking down those silos. And that really wraps up the quick overview of Monte Carlo, what we do. And with that, I'm Jesse Miller from Monte Carlo. Feel free to reach out to me afterwards.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jesse. Okay, we're going to have our third panelist today give you a quick overview, and then we'll dive into questions. So once again, Danny Sandwell, Senior Solutions Manager at Quest. Welcome to the broadcast, Danny.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, everyone, for attending. My name's Danny Sandwell. I've been in the data business. I'm probably the old man on the panel for around 30 years. So spent a lot of time in the early days trying to bring data together for organizations to start, that journey down that business intelligence and analytics type of road. And then worked with the Irwin brand that Quest acquired a couple of years ago to really take that sort of data modeling foundation that really is at the foundation of democratizing data and bringing that out into a set of solutions that allow organizations to really build that foundation to be successful. So really kind of what drives us is what we're hearing from our customers. Quest has been around for a long time, a lot of very large customers. And they're trying to get to that nirvana of data democratization, but they're really not 100% sure of how to get there. They're leveraging us for value in a number of different places and really looking to us to help them achieve some of the goals that they want, which is, being able to get better business outcomes driven from their data, to be successful in democratizing the data without putting the organization at risk, and really starting to build a foundation of a data-first culture that they need to succeed. So, when you look at what we do, and Quest has a number of solutions, across identity management, platform management, but in the business unit and where we really focus on data, we have something that we've coined as data empowerment solutions. And really it's about providing and coming in and providing that capability that organizations need to move to that next stage. And we break them down into, solutions across data intelligence, understanding what you have in your landscape and how to best use it and how to move that forward, making sure that operationally everything is in place to make sure that the data is where it needs to be, when it needs to be, in the sort of condition that it needs to be, and then making sure that you have all of the protection schemes for the data, all the way out to things like endpoint devices where that data may be going and being put at additional risk. When we look at DataOps specifically, solutions around bringing together what we have in the data world and what they want in the analytics world, and providing that collaborative environment to allow organizations to really understand that and make that leap. Making sure that there's the right governance, quality, and insights around that data so that they can make the right decisions on what data to use, what's the best source, where to go and get that, and then what potentially is going on with that data that they need to be concerned with. Solutions around replication, performance monitoring and assurance, and of course, being able to take it past that last sort of mile, if you will, with capabilities to across platform, really look at your data, make sure it's in the right state, clean it in ways that it needs to be cleansed. When we look at when we do a lot of sort of research within our customers, both anecdotally and through surveys and things like that, but also we look at what's going on beyond the world of Quest. And, a big part of what organizations are looking for are things like lineage, quality, business context, and then understanding, what data is available to them, where it is, how to get at it. And really, when we look at it, the things that are really driving folks closer to democratization successfully is making sure that they have a place to really discover what data they have from a self-service perspective, make sure they understand where that data came from and what happened to it along the way, being able to guide them to the best data for their use case, and making sure that they understand the level of quality so that they can make the decisions they need to make in terms of how to use that data and what to put behind the insights that data drives. And really what we try to do, especially with our data intelligence software, is really help them get their arms around their data environment as it is, make sure that they understand what the architecture is, what data assets they have, and then provide them that capability to curate and govern those things, make sure that they have a view into the state of that data and the pros and cons of that, the classification of that data. Is it sensitive? How sensitive is it? Those types of things. Provide them in line, the ability to, profile and understand the quality scoring around that data, and eventually get to the point where they can start, distributing trusted, governed data in a much more, widely accessible manner across their organization. So at the foundation, that's what we do at Quest. And, again, come and visit us, and we'd love to talk to you about where you are on that journey and help you get to that stage that you want to be when it comes to data democratization.
Fantastic. Thank you, Danny. So we thought instead of having lengthier presentations today, we'd have more of a conversation around key topics related to the subject matter. So I'm going to toss out some questions to our speakers today, and we're going to see where we go with this. So to start things off, Ben, from your experience, where do you see organizations mostly get stuck on their journey to implement data democratization?
Okay, so I will first start with a disclaimer. We speak with many people from mostly from data teams like CDOs, VP, data analytics, data engineering, and so on. But keep in mind that some of the people we are speaking in the context of a data security platform. So it might be interesting to also hear what others are encountering. And I would say that I'm going back to this slide, just not to this slide, to that slide, just to give some context. I think it's about here, what I spoke about before. So things like everybody wants to hunt that buffalo of data value, right? But then reality hits, And some of this reality is the ambiguity around, and again, we find a lot of trouble around security and access. Like, how do I actually give people the ability to search for the data they want to access, and how do I enable access in a way that will be secure, but will also be manageable as an organization? I don't want to, especially in 2023, I don't want to onboard 20 new data engineers just to grant and revoke permissions and apply different transformations to make the data available. It comes down in many cases to the migration phase. The migration phase is either stuck somewhere. For example, you sign up with your new cloud data provider, but you send 0 queries, or you're starting to send queries, but only for non-sensitive data because you're finding it hard to get a buy-in for to move the real juicy data to the cloud data warehouse, the data with customer data in it, with the PII and so on. And sometimes it's stuck on manual work, data engineering project that turns into side quests of trying to enable this whole self-service experience, and getting stuck on different requirements, compliance, security, contractual obligations, and so on and so forth. So that, I think, is pretty much where we see the mess.
Understood. Thanks, Ben. Jesse, I'd love your input on this question. Based on your experience, your customers and prospects, where do you see companies mainly getting stuck on data democratization?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting journey for sure. Perhaps one of the hardest areas I've really seen around adopting this data democratization really starts with the culture and mindset that you really need to move towards data democratization. Getting everyone in the organization on board with the idea can be difficult. Some people may feel that the data is owned by certain departments or individuals, or maybe even that it's too complex to be understood by everyone. So kind of breaking down that is really important. To really overcome this, I think organizations really need to promote that culture of data-driven decision-making, if we can use kind of like the buzzword of data-driven decision-making, and really form this dependency or this literacy around data in the organization, making sure that everyone understands the benefits of data democratization. Secondly, I'd say that really data quality and accessibility really needs to be kind of given a mind to. It's also kind of a really big area that people get stuck. If your data that you're exposing or trying to kind of share with everyone is unreliable, or people can't get access to it, it really breaks down that initiative and makes everyone really kind of stop in their tracks there. This is, of course, where data observability really comes to mind, in my opinion. The third thing, Ben, you mentioned this a little bit, is around like security and governance, making sure that the data is properly, governed and secured, making sure that, organizations have the right policies in place to make sure that the data that's going to be exposed has the right good data governance practices around it. So I'd say those are kind of the 3 areas that I really see.
Understood. Danny, I'm sure you have an opinion on this. What are you seeing at Quest?
Yeah, it's always tough going third because these guys are stealing all my thunder. No kidding. I think that cultural piece that Jesse talked about, I think is at the foundation of it. There's a lot of factors and a lot of silos in most organizations, and when you look at democratizing data, I think what scares people is as Ben said, maybe not really understanding the concept fully, and B, not knowing where to start, right? So I think that for a lot of them, they're afraid to put their organization at risk, and especially if they have, some of the older data governance practices, which, I used to refer to as Dr. No, right? That they had one answer, and it was no, because they were, totally risk averse and really not willing to look at the bigger picture and then try to understand in terms of how to morph that. So I think, older data governance practices, depending on the organization, the length of time they've been at this, some real, technology limitations, as well as, sort of technical debt on the technology side, but also debt on the skills and expertise. Everybody wants to get those hot data engineers. Not everybody can afford them. And quite frankly, they have a lot of people in place that may be, in a good position to be there because of the sort of institutional knowledge that they have, and then trying to find that mix. So I think, at the end of it, it is a scary thing because it is a big change within the organization. And it's just, where do we get started? What do we do first?
Understood. And I'm glad you brought up skills. That's always part of the equation. Okay, so moving on to our next question, and Ben, we're going to start with you again. What do we do when there are security pushbacks to data democratization and data accessibility programs?
So eventually, I've seen that a lot in the cybersecurity space. In many cases, there's a technology advancement, and sometimes security stays as a disabler instead of an enabler, and that doesn't hold for long in most cases. For example, I can, like some examples, for example, I remember when a lot of businesses were moving to open APIs and requiring APIs, security had to make the adjustments. And of course, with DevOps and the move to DevOps was also something where security state of mind had to change. So basically, eventually it's a business issue. When a company understands, and most companies, as I've shown before, understand that data access needs to be broad in the organization, in most cases, probably not in 100% of the companies. The security needs to find a way to do that without incurring additional risks. And there are ways of doing that, of course. So basically, they need to adjust the security policies, the access policies to the new situation, and find the ways to enforce. And last bit is they need a good visibility both to the data, like knowing, for example, which parts of their data has sensitive data in it, and make sure that these are the parts that they focus on when protecting the data, because these are the riskiest parts. And also having a good understanding of who is accessing the data, especially the sensitive data. And one last thing, not just part of the last sentence, we have just released an free open source tool called the Universal Data Permission Scanner that can scan that for, like, you can download it and run it, and it scans permissions across your different databases and data stores. So that's just as a context to that. That's it.
Okay, and if any folks are interested in checking that tool out, they would go to your website.
So I think that we haven't really, maybe I've jumped ahead of it's in our GitHub somewhere, but worst case, send me a link, because I can send you the link to the repo.
Gotcha.
So.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, Jesse, any thoughts, anything you'd like to add on this question?
Oh
What
yeah.
do we do with our security pushbacks?
I'd say like a data democratization project is not complete without pushbacks and challenges around this. So they're definitely common. I think the thing to kind of realize with a lot of these pushbacks is that they're really in good faith from an organization trying to protect itself and its customers and really make sure that the right processes and respective audits are done and followed just to protect the organization. So though you've got pushback, it's definitely in good faith. So just how to get around that. And of course, there's some ways I've seen in other organizations to really navigate through this. Ben, you were mentioning security. That's the first thing that comes up. And I think at Monte Carlo, we've helped a lot of customers through some of this as well. And one thing that I would recommend seem to be really useful is when you're going to do this, evaluate the security risks and really bring this project to your InfoSec team, or really be prepared to answer the questions that you know they're going to ask. Like, does the data that you're trying to expose contain any sensitive or confidential data? Is it PII details on our users? Does it contain details on our intellectual property or trade secrets? Things like that that those are going to be the questions you get. So be sure that you can be prepared to answer those and provide even proof of whether it contains that information or not. So the second thing too is while you're going through these security risks and kind of really trying to get this project move forward, continuously communicate the benefits of it to the broader organization. A lot of times people get bogged down in this project of like, hey, we're just trying to expose this data, but really keep communicating why. What is this going to do to your organization? Keep highlighting benefits such as improved collaboration, transparency, innovation, and really kind of how it's going to benefit larger teams within your organization with democratizing this data. And third, with the security kind of process it goes through, they're also going to be asking about is training in place? Does everyone that's going to have access to this data know of best practices? So make sure that you've got training, education in place, policies, procedures. Make sure that everyone that's going to be accessing this data has done even like the simplest training, like password management, protection, or phishing awareness, safe data sharing practices, just general things like that, making sure that education is there. So those are some things that we've seen be really helpful with organizations going through this similar projects.
Got it. Thanks, Jesse. And I love that you mentioned, continuing to highlight the benefits. I think sometimes it's easy to get bogged down by, what are the risks, what are the challenges, and sometimes lose sight of that, especially across a team or a company. Danny, what are your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, we're, a lot of amens to what I've heard there. Where we've seen or our customers be successful is, first communicating, that business case and the benefits to the organization, but also making sure that, those security folks are in from day one as stakeholders with, skin in the game in this, so that they can, highlight the risks and articulate those risks. So, that sort of answering the questions goes both ways. Security folks are by their very nature risk adverse. And if they don't know specifically the nuances of what they're protecting, they're going to protect everything the same. So, I'll back up this idea of, your ability to, describe and articulate your data landscape so that they understand exactly what you are trying to do and the nature of that data, is going to allow them to get much more surgical in terms of what they need to make sure that, things like compliance, things like security and avoiding, loss and attacks and those types of things are built into the plan up front. And then again, making sure that all of the folks in the organization understand what their role is as a citizen in this data democracy, and what they need to be responsible for, right? And I think that more that you have communication, more that you have visibility around that, and then the more that visibility that you have around the nature of the data that's being affected through this process, I think that combination will get everyone on board in terms of, or has in terms of our experience with customers, making sure that they have the right things in place. There's no surprises for anybody, and nobody feels like they're being put at risk by somebody else's priorities. I think it's, if everyone's on the same page and you're all working together, then it's that sort of back and forth negotiation between those stakeholders and folks trying to get to the greater good.
Understood. Okay, we're going to move on to our next question. And Jesse, I'm going to give this one to you to start off. How is data observability different from a data catalog?
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, these are two things that definitely come up in this conversation of data democratization. And it's something we get a lot of at Monte Carlo when people come to us and say, what is the difference? And data observability and data catalogs are really both important concepts and tools in this whole field of data management, but they do serve different purposes. Data observability is really the ability to understand data in real time and the health of it as it flows across various systems and processes. I covered some of this earlier in my brief presentation, but really we view it as the 5 pillars of freshness, volume, schema, quality, and lineage to really help you do that detection, that resolution, and prevention of data quality issues. On the other hand, really a data catalog really serves as this centralized repository for the management of this metadata that describes the data assets within an organization. It provides that metadata information such as schema, format, location, ownership, usage, things like that really are that metadata you store against those data assets. And really the goal of a data catalog is to help with that discoverability that is really an important part of the process for data democratization and just making sure you've got that accessibility and awareness there. So both are useful tools and concepts, but they do serve different purposes in this data democratization project.
Understood. Thanks, Jesse. Danny, I'm going to let you weigh in on this, and feel free to expand upon this as well. I think Jesse provided a great definition, but anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I think that what I would add to this is Jesse's absolutely right in terms of the role, but I think that as you start to see more intelligence brought into data cataloging, and I guess what I'm saying is we're starting to see a level of convergence between the two. So we have a data catalog at Quest. One of the primary things that we brought to the table with that came from the request from our customers that they wanted to be able to see a lot of these different indicators in line in that one place. So they're looking for a level of one-stop shopping. And then, really putting different views onto a catalog in terms of who the user is and what their interest is, what their context of the questions. So, to me, I see these things, converging because they're both requirements, and maintaining two different things is the challenge of that becomes, more silos, right? You don't want to cure silos with creating silos. So I think you're starting to see a lot of convergence around that, in terms of, things like lineage, things like quality, and those things being in, within that sort of catalog context, along with governance and literacy and all of those other things. So as part of the discoverability, when you get down to the practitioners, they're working with it, sort of in a day-to-day sort of, triaging and looking at the overall health. And not every catalog customer or user is looking for that level. But, what we're hearing is that catalog has a lot of good information in it. And they want to see that building and then different views for different personas that are out there, so that, you can start to leverage that catalog. A lot of our customers are driving metadata-driven automation out of the data catalog to really start to mature some of the processes around, changing data, new data, being brought into different systems and things like that. Same with the quality aspect of it. So I guess what I'm seeing is a convergence there with the right aspects for the right people moving forward. But yeah, they absolutely both have a key role to play.
Understood. Ben, anything you'd like to add to this?
No, actually, no, not to this point.
Okay, well, then we will move on to our next question. Our next question is, how can data observability be used to optimize my data environment? Jesse.
All right. So data observability, we've already kind of talked about the definition there. But of course, there's a number of ways you can actually use it for optimization, especially kind of going down when you start democratizing this data. You probably collect more of it. You want to distribute it further. So you can definitely improve data quality by detecting these issues and addressing them before they cause larger problems with this observability in place. You can also I'd say you could increase operational efficiency. With observability on your data in place, you can also kind of really identify these areas in your data environment that are perhaps underperforming or causing bottlenecks. Doing things like that can also really allow you to optimize data processing workflows or improve like overall operational efficiency of some of your data as it moves between these pipelines and such. The third thing I'd say is having data observability in place as you start doing democratization of this data can also really help you enhance data security. Now, what I mean here by this security is that this is not a substitute for data governance. What I'm talking more about here is more around monitoring the data for security threats or anomalies, so you can also like really quickly detect and respond to any potential security breaches and things like that would help your organization minimize data loss or data theft or something like that. So as you start getting more people accessing this data, you start getting in its hands more, you need more observability on it to kind of make sure that things are still going the right way and nothing's going awry. So that's three things I'd kind of really say.
Understood. Thanks, Jesse. Danny, anything you'd like to add or any thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I think I think Jesse nailed it. I think it's the holistic nature of the approach. All right, because when you're, again, I don't want to keep using the silo word, but it's really that sort of combination of not just these different aspects, but how they're interacting together. And as organizations really, start to look at much more of a sort of flow perspective of data as opposed to, islands of data that move around the organization to support different needs. I think it's going to be key that you have that sort of end-to-end view, because absolutely, if the quality is not there, you need to have a real-time view in terms of where's your quality at, and so that organizations can make decisions on using that data appropriately. From a performance perspective, being able to figure out where along that pipeline things are going wrong, is super important. But the net is that as you start to democratize data, the biggest challenge that you can have is if it fails, right? And having that combined observability of different aspects of it is a very powerful capability to build your foundation on.
Got it. Thanks, Danny. Ben, would you like to chime in anything related to observability and security?
Yeah, so I think as to what Danny said, I think the holistic approach, or the understanding that you need a certain stack, there's the buzzword or non-buzzword, modern data stack, but you need some sort of stack to give you the entire spectrum of what you need to handle data in a way that's going to be not only supporting your needs for the data, but also the risks of poor data quality, of poor data security, and so on is very important. And since you mentioned it, of course, security observability is also very important. I mean, I understand to your point, Jesse, or at least if I understood that point, having the knowledge that something is wrong with my data may indicate a security concern, which is something that's important, of course, but it's also important to not only observe the data, but also observe the data users, the data consumers, the data producers, and have a good understanding of who can potentially access the data, who is actually access the data, what they're accessing, and what conditions you allow them to access the data with. So that is also an important piece of that puzzle or stack, in my opinion.
Okay. Moving on to our next question. Danny, we're going to start with you. DataOps is a key enabler for successful data democratization, but adoption is lagging. What is impeding organizations in adopting a DataOps approach?
Sure. This is a big overarching question, but I think at the end of the day, it is a combination of fear and maybe not a full understanding of what data ops really is. I think people are finally getting their head around what DevOps is, and they're not really sure how that applies to data or what that looks like. But in terms of what's slowing the train or making them hesitant, the reality is that a lot of organizations do not have their arms around their existing data landscape. So, and they may have got governance pieces in place where they feel like, from a compliance perspective and from that perspective, they're in a good place and they have their arms around it. And now we want to start really, pushing the limits and opening the doors to allowing much wider access, which means are the schemes and the things that they put in place and invested in, from a governance perspective, going to be able to stand up, and what would need to change there? What does it really mean in our entire data landscape? How do we deal with, concerns around, potential legacy technology that is really expensive? Organizations are still, trying to figure out, they know they're going to the cloud, or there's, somewhat in the cloud, but how, where, why, and what they're going to get from that. So, I think that, everything is built on a foundation. And if they don't feel that they have that foundation, bringing in something like this, feels somewhat like putting the cart before the horse. So, what we've seen is a lot of organizations taking preparatory steps. And looking in terms of trying to get rid of some of the legacy technology. trying to understand what this is really going to mean, see if their data governance framework is really in a position to be able to respond to this, and then using that time to sort of educate the organization, to increase the data literacy in an organization, so that folks can really understand what it is that they're buying into, what that impact is going to be. So, I'm an old modeler from years and years, and if you don't understand what your as is, then it's very tough to make good decisions about where you want to be. And if you can't make that difference and understand what the deltas are between those two positions, and you can't articulate that, then it's tough to get people on board. And that sort of organizational silos and sort of that super risk averse culture that you may have around data in your organization is absolutely going to get in the way of adopting these types of modern approaches to data.
Understood. Ben, what are your thoughts on what's impeding organizations adopting DataOps?
So again, I can speak mainly from my perspective and experience, both being in the security side and as a data owner, and in Satori. And was it today or yesterday? I was speaking with one of the analysts in one of the analyst firms that we all know, and he was saying something along the line that data engineers they only care about security, or they only care about security when it's too late, when they get the requirement at the last notice. And it reminded me, I gave a couple of talks about a year or two ago about DataSecOps, which basically means that it really reminded me of that, because it's the same thing we had with DevOps, right? We changed the processes. So if once, when we've all been around for a while, so if at once a bank would release an app every quarter, or every 2 quarters, or every year, and then the last month or so you would freeze everything and security would come in, and I was part of that security that comes in, do penetration testing and stuff like that, and make sure that everything is proof, and only then release the software. When we went DevOps and CI/CD, it all changed and everything became more frequent, and you can't do that when you're releasing twice a day, right? So same thing with the DataOps and the fact that security needs to be bolted into the process, from design to monitoring, and the data engineer or DataOps team should not meet the requirements, as an afterthought. That's where I see this.
Understood. Thanks, Ben. Jesse, what about you? What's impeding organizations in DataOps?
Yeah, I think both. Everyone's kind of covered some good points here so far. Danny, you mentioned something that I really liked as one thing that's really impeding in many companies is just the lack of awareness and understanding here. Many organizations I think we've talked to may not be aware of the benefits of DataOps, or may not really even fully understand the approach, and they may be hesitant to adopt new practices. So that's something I've definitely seen a lot come up as like the first thing, just lack of awareness and understanding around DataOps. Organizations may be resistant to change. I think this is another really important thing as well. Ben, I think you mentioned this in some of your bit of just, being resistant or having the security practices in place to handle some of these. Security is only needed when it's too late. I love that. But really having the practices in place are kind of important. Siloed teams is another thing that has come up a lot. Really having siloed teams and not being able to kind of get them together to kind of agree on this initiative is kind of lagging some of these initiatives. and limited resources within those teams is definitely a detractor. I'd say one of the things that I've seen really stop some of these data ops efforts in their tracks is lack of leadership support too. It really, to make this big change within an organization to adopt data ops practices, it really requires a strong leadership support to be successful. So really, if these senior leaders within the organization, all the way up to the C-suite, are not really fully committed to the approach, it may be really difficult to get the buy-in from other stakeholders within the organization, kind of top down even, to implement these changes. So yeah, I agree with a lot of what everyone said, but it definitely does have its share of challenges and laggards along the way.
Thanks, Jesse. Okay, we're going to move on to our final discussion point question today. Danny, we'll start with you again. Data culture is a key component of data democratization. How does DataOps enable an organization to develop a data-first culture for success?
Another great question. Yeah, it's funny. I think that they're mutually beneficial to each other. But I think that this goes back to what Jesse was saying in the last piece in terms of senior leadership and buy-in for these things. So I think that there's a lot of lip service given to being data driven. But I think at the highest levels, there's still a lack of understanding of both the benefits, the realities, and the requirements of that. So, a good data ops, program, even if not implemented fully, but in terms of articulated of what it can do, is going to go a long way to changing the folks that may be laggards in really embracing data as the way to go for success within your organization. I know that sounds strange. I think we all know of the power of data, but one of the questions that we see is how is this going to be different? So I'm data first now, which means something. How is it going to be materially different? And it's really incumbent on the folks that are trying to make these changes in the organization from the top level down to make sure that everybody understands what the benefits are and how you're going to get to those benefits, because they don't happen just because, we value data. You don't just value data, you have to make data more valuable. So data ops can really help in terms of maybe not establishing a data first culture, but really supporting the adoption of that and the belief in it by showing people how things are going to be different and what the results of that difference is going to be. And I think that equally it goes the other way, is that if you're doing a good job of working your organization from the top down to really understand the impact and the potential impact of data on their success moving forward, then you can also use that to be more successful in bringing data ops on board in terms of a mature data process that's going to support that. So I see a real sort of mutually beneficial, mutually supporting here. But I think from the skeptics in terms of really establishing that culture across the organization, being able to articulate what data ops can achieve and what the impact of that can really go a long way in terms of saying, hey, yes, you know what, I think I'm going to place my bets on data because, as we can see, data democratization, culture is an aspect of it, capability, access and trust. If you break any of those, then you're really, going to be pulling yourself out of the soup, if you will. So they all have to be in place, and data ops as a way of doing things and really saying, we're not just talking about data, we're going to make it a reality, and this is how it's going to happen. I think is really going to be a boon for any organization that's trying to make that leap from a cultural perspective.
Got it. Ben, how about you? Data first culture, how folks can get there faster.
So first of all, 100% on what Danny said. And I think that it also goes well with what Jesse earlier said. I will phrase it in my own words because I have a goldfish memory. But getting to get people to adopt the changes, you need to communicate the value that they will get, and so I see it as kind of a chicken and egg. You're getting better DataOps investment in resources, the more you have a data first culture, and vice versa. So it's part of the same thing. And once the organization realizes the full potential of their data, and a lot of organizations have, there is no, they're mutually beneficial, as Danny said.
Thanks, Ben. Jesse, would love your opinion on this question.
Yeah, I love what you said there, Danny. That a lot of lip surface is really given to being data driven, a data driven culture, but there's not a lot of actual backing sometimes to these changes, at least when they initially start. You usually see this initiative come up and say, yeah, we're going to switch to being a data driven culture, but at that time no one really knows what that means. And really, also what you said there, Danny, is don't just value the data, but make it more valuable. I think that's at kind of the core of what is needed to make this change. And kind of when we talk about making that data more valuable, I mean, barring a lot from kind of the DevOps practices, there's a lot of things with DataOps that really need to be in place to get that data culture, that data first culture. Things like making sure you've got automated data pipelines in place. I know I'm going really deep here, but these are the things that really make data first work. It's having automated data pipelines, continuous integration and delivery, CI/CD approach to data management, things like that. Really, also things like a DevOps style collaboration. Borrowing heavily from the whole DevOps practices. Emphasizing collaboration between developers, operations teams, but also kind of fostering this collaboration between members of your data management team, your data practitioners, and things like that, breaking down those silos. And finally, kind of another kind of piece to making this data first culture work is that data quality governance, emphasizing, I know we've talked about it multiple times in different questions, but making sure you've got the quality in place and that you've got the governance security over everything. So yeah, I mean, I love what both you, Danny, and Ben, both of you said about kind of how this data first culture comes to fruition, but it's definitely not without its challenges.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, we've gone beyond the top of the hour, but the attendees are sticking with us, and we thank you for that. Real quick, from each of you, I have one final question. If there's one thing you want our attendees to walk away keeping in mind, what would that be? And Ben, let's start with you.
Okay. First of all, keep in mind to unmute yourself. That's the first thing to keep in mind. But seriously, well, I would state the obvious. As we've all seen in a million researches, companies are moving to fast to adopt more data, to make data accessible to more people, and make great value of it. And when you're doing that data modernization or data migration, please, whether or not you're using Satori, but please do it in a secure way, especially since you probably have my data in there as well. So please secure your data.
Wise words. Jesse.
All right. One thing to take away, I'd say don't give up if you're starting down this journey of data democratization. Many organizations we work with, they go through the trials to kind of get their data in places where it can be democratized or kind of shared across the org. And I mean, it is a painstaking process and a headache to go through. But at the end, the results really speak for themselves. It enables many of the things that they're trying to get to in the way of collaboration and kind of just moving their business faster, even differentiating from their competitors, things like that. So, don't give up, but make sure you go through the different processes along the way, security, data quality. Make sure that each one of those things are given a strong mind to, because the last thing you want is to get far down and something come up and it cause your data democratization effort to fail. So don't give up, but make sure you kind of go through the steps and kind of keep the right things in mind as you're going through it. So that's it for me.
Okay, and Danny.
Measure twice, cut once. Make sure that your make sure that your plan is as holistic as possible and has the answers for all of those different stakeholders that need to be part of it to be successful. All right, so you don't want to drill them down with technical gobbledygook, but at the end of the day, everybody needs to be on board with what the prize is, and everybody needs to be on board with what the price is. And then there needs to be a plan, because it's, you're not going to boil the ocean, to use another overused phrase. So then, make sure that your plan has some good, measurable, incremental steps towards getting there, whether it's, preparing the land, preparing the ground for what you're planting, or if you're farther along, making sure that you understand when this is what needs to happen, this will be the impact of that happening, and this is what we're doing to prepare for that impact. So I think that good planning, good communication, and educating everybody around, I think is the real. It's a long game, right? Because these steps that we're taking today are going to prepare us for whatever the next data challenges and the next data use case and the next way that organizations are going to want to be able to leverage data for a competitive advantage. So just take it, make sure you're doing it smart, make sure you understand what you're doing, and make sure that you're communicating that to get everybody on board.
Okay, well, that is all the time we have for questions today. I apologize that we were unable to get to all of your questions, but as I stated earlier, all questions will be answered via email. We're going to share them with the speakers. I would like to give a big thank you to our speakers for coming on board today and sharing their insights and expertise. Once again, Ben Harrisburg, Chief Scientist and VP of Marketing at Satori, Jesse Miller, Product Manager at Monte Carlo, and Danny Sandwell, Senior Solutions Manager at Quest. If you in attendance would like to review this presentation or send it to a colleague, you can use the same exact URL that you used for today's live event. It will be archived, and we will send you an email notification once that archive is posted. Also, as I mentioned earlier, just for participating in today's event, you could win this $100 Amazon gift card. The winner will be announced on April 28th. We'll let you know by email if you are the lucky viewer. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon.